Welcome aboard. It's been a snowy few days here in Victoria, BC. We've got snow all over the boat, and so I thought it would be a great time to have a go at painting a snowy seascape. So I've put together a little tutorial in case you would like to try one as well. I'm using a Fabriano Artistico cold pressed paper to paint on today. You can use any cold pressed paper that doesn't have too much of a tooth to it. So Arches, Fabriano Studio are all good options too. I'll be using Phthalo Green, blue shade, Pyrrol Red. You could also substitute Quinacridone Red for this, just a fairly red, not too blue, not too green. I've got Quinacridone Magenta. You could use Alizarin Crimson or Pyrrol Crimson instead. And I have got Indigo. This is the Winsor and Newton, which is my favourite shade of this colour. You could use another deep intense blue like Indathrone as well. And I'm just creating some quick swatches with my reds and greens just to see some of the different mixes that I can get combined with them and how they vary from dark to light as I add water to change the value of the colour. I want to have a couple of trees in my picture. I think I'll start off with the forward island. So I'm just drawing out a couple of conifers. I'm trying to make the shape not too regular. I don't want it to look like kind of a cartoon Christmas tree. I'm just sort of keeping my pencil wavy and organic. And I want a little island or headland for it to be on. Again, I'm keeping my pencil moving, curved lines. And that's gonna just give a bit of life and a bit of realism to the final thing. Okay, now my second tree is going to be on a slightly more distant headland, so I'm going to make sure that the top of it is lower than the one close to me. I'm just bending the top of it into the picture a little bit. If I had it arcing outwards, it would lead your eye out of the painting. And I'm trying to press quite gently. I'll probably want to erase these lines later. You use a hard pencil, HB, and press gently, then you end up with quite pale lines. If you're using a black pencil, something like a 4B, then you can press softly and get very black lines, which are then can be a bit harder to remove. And again, I'm just sketching a headland in, and I want some mountains in the background. Now I'm just freehanding this straight line. Oops, there we go. Don't be afraid to turn. Don't be afraid to turn your paper around if need be. And of course, you can use a ruler if you want to. And then I'm just gently gonna sketch in the mountain tops. I don't tend to draw in every single line that I'm including. Actually, I think I want more sky. This is a kneadable eraser or putty rubber, depending on where in the world you are. And they're fantastic with watercolors because they don't leave little bits, and they're pretty gentle on the paper. And again, I'm not being too precise with this. I'm keeping my lines a bit wobbly. It just makes everything feel a little bit more organic, and I think that's all the information I need going through. Just going to very gently, I'm just tapping the paper with my eraser just to pick up a couple of areas where the pencil's smudged. Okay, and I think we're good to go. Okay, my paints are fresh out the tube, so they're all still quite wet. If you're using pan paints, then you might just want to give them a spritz with an atomizer of water, or drop some water on them just a couple of minutes before you want to start painting. That's going to help you lift thicker, richer colours, especially when we're working on the darker shades. So I'm getting a bit of my Pyrrol Red, which is my red, not too blue, not too green. And I think I'm going to need quite a lot of my Phthalo Green. You see how thick this mix is? Again, I can drag my brush through it. So this is going to go on pretty dark. This is going to be quite black. And I know because it's not runny, that even though watercolors tend to lighten as they dry, this one isn't going to lighten too much. And then, because I want my branches to feel like they have snow on them, I'm just going to paint the undersides and the bottom of the tree. Bits where snow wouldn't stick to. And I tend to freehand this, but you are of course welcome to draw out these lines. It's whatever works for you. And I don't have to let the dark strokes go all the way across the branch each time, or across the tree. And then I can move on to the other one. This is really quite intuitive, just painting what feels right. I want to leave enough white negative space that it feels snowy. But the dark is going to give it a bit of presence as well. I'm trying to vary the widths of the snow, which I can just add a little bit of green there. Just to try and make it feel natural. I don't want it to look like it's a stripy bumblebee or kind of have even candy stripes. Don't want this too dark because the sky in the background is going to be a dark blue. Okay, I think that'll do for now. I can always come back later. Okay, and then for my mountains, I want those to be pretty neutral. And the farther away things are, the lighter they tend to look. So I'm going to take a bit more of my Pyrrol Red. And I'm mixing it in with the green that I made earlier. You can see already, you can see the bottom of my palette through that. This is a lot lighter. It's going to be a lot paler in value. The consistency, you know, it's more like I've just spilt tea. I can test it out. Maybe still a little greener than I want. Just adding a tiny bit of red now. Don't want it to appear pink. Yeah, and that's just neutralized it a little bit. Just have a little more water in there. Okay, so this is pretty pale. This is pretty light. And I'm starting to paint these background mountains. I like to leave a little gap. in between my sections of colour, but that's just me. You can let yours touch, there's not a problem with that. And I'm just going in with water now. I'm going to tip my paper a little bit. And this is letting it gradate a bit. So the tone of the mountain will be slightly lighter at the peak. And I can do the same thing over here. So I'm just going in with a little bit of colour. And this is just water on my brush now. And a bit more water. Just going over that patch there, it just looked a little bit spotty. Bringing a bit of green back into my mix. I'm just going to do the same with the foreground hills. The green is just going to give it a little more colour and warm it up. So it's going to bring that foreground forward. I think I want the peak to be white because eventually I think I want to erase that line. I'll make sure there's colour up to the trees. And then the same thing over here. Begin with that pale green. Now I've just got water on my brush. Again, I'm keeping my paper tilted so I don't get blots and back runs. Lets me control the gradation a bit more. And again, I think I want there to be a bit more white. I've just got a piece of kitchen paper. That's just going to lift off some of that very light colour. Okay, next up I'm going to work on the sky. So I'm using indigo. This is a Winsor & Newton. Indathrone blue would work as well, or you can make your own indigo using a deep blue and adding some black or adding a little bit of sienna. So again, I'm tipping my paper. And I'm painting with neat colour. This is going to be pretty dark. So the sky, as it arcs over us, always ends up looking darker. I'm going to draw the bead down where this gets a little bit tricky is trying to paint around the tree and leave the tree white. Just going to get a little water on my brush. To start the graduation. And I'm working quite fast here. Because what's happening is I've got the heater on and the paint is drying. So I'm keeping working across on either side of the tree. Trying to keep my strokes going from left to right to draw down any beads. I might end up with a little bit of a band there where the paper's dried. Trying not to get too perfectionist about this. Just getting a little bit more water on my brush. Rinsing my brush off. Very important I don't tip the paper. And although it's really tempting to go back over this bit, I'm going to avoid it because the more I play and fiddle, the more of a mess I will probably end up making. And then I'm going to keep it this way to dry. Switching to my slightly thinner brush. And then this is my Phthalo Green. And a bit of the Quin Magenta. You see they actually mix a blue when they go together. And then I'm moving down to the little channel between the two headlands or islands that I've drawn. And I often start off painting where the water has the most movement. And again, you can try drawing this out. I tend to let it be pretty intuitive. Okay, quite like that. I think I want the next bit to be a little bit more green. And of course you can test out these colors at any time. I don't want it to end up looking sort of tropical turquoise, but I think having some vibrant greens here is just going to lift the whole thing and add a bit more interest. I'm just filling in the colours and the spaces. Okay, I'm going to go back to, this is the green I mixed for the mountains. So this is the Phthalo Green and Pyrrol Red. You see how that's quite a bit more neutralized, so just having patches of this is just gonna keep the wintry feel, I think. You can add little swirls and shapes. Again, I like to keep white lines between my strokes. If you let yours touch, it doesn't matter. You can be as free as you want. I want this to feel quite calm, so I'm painting some long, sinuous shapes. A little bit of that kind of turquoisey green back again. A little bit more magenta. That's made that blue. Just want the blue tone to carry on past here. And don't be afraid to just turn your paper as you need to. And then as I work back, I'm going to let my colours get lighter and more neutral. So I'm keeping dipping into my Pyrrol Red and Phthalo Green mix. Just following the contours I've already got painted there. You can see I'm letting the lines get straighter. They don't have to be so curvaceous. They're just kind of a supporting act at this stage. don't want it all to be the same colour, so just adding a little bit of extra water to lighten the Quin Magenta and Phthalo Green. This is just going to give subtle variations in those neutrals, these green greys. You might notice I'm not always rinsing off my brush in between dipping into the colours at this stage. Again, that just helps tie everything together a little bit. I'm not using so many colours that I need to worry about making mud. And I can still have a little bit of shape going on in the waves if I want to. I want this to feel quite calm and serene. You can play around with this as much as you like. You can start to make it look stormy. You can actually deliberately muddle up those colours as well. And a little more water as I approach the distant mountains. I'm going to let this be quite a thick, wide band because I don't want too much detail. Okay, and there we go. Almost done. I'm dipping into my indigo. I'm going to twist this way just to get the flow of the paper a bit better. And I'm going to pull some indigo ripples in. And I'm just going to make a thick, dark version of my Pyrrol Red and Phthalo Green here. See, that's back to dark and relatively thick. This is just going to create a few reflections. Lets me add a bit more movement in. Trying to keep everything a bit curved. It's okay to let them sort of go off the page. Also let the colours mingle together a bit. So that's the Phthalo and Pyrrol. I'm just dropping in a little bit of indigo to add a bit of interest. I don't want to overdo the dark. This is just painting until it feels right. And if you start to think, am I overdoing it? Then stop and come back to it. You can always add more later. I'm going to get my eraser. I'm just going to get rid of the pencil lines. I don't want them in the final painting. And that's going to help me see if there's anywhere I need to darken up my colours a bit or add more detail. So be very careful to make sure that your paint is actually dry before you start doing this. Otherwise you'll end up with smudges. So I want some shadows in the foreground. I'm going to get a bit of my indigo. And I'm adding a lot of water to that. It's a pale blue, it's kind of a herbal tea, very watery consistency. And I don't want to be too precise about this, but this is just going to give a little bit of life and flow to the snow there, and shadow under the tree. And I can add some of this to the snow on my tree as well. You can see where I don't have as much contrast there as I'd like to. So it just helps it stand out from the mountains a little bit more. Again, just turn your paper as you need to so the flow feels natural. Just adding little tiny pips. Again, it doesn't have to be a lot. Sort of feel like I need a tiny bit more detail there. Let's get some green, I think. Maybe in that mid-ground water as well. Switching in with the indigo. Maybe just a little bit more indigo in the shadow under the tree. And to finish it off, I want something in the sky. So I'm using a Dr. P.H. Martin's calligraphy colour. This is the copper plate gold. This is, I think, the thickest gold paint or gold ink I've been able to find. But you can use fine tech paints as well. A gel pen would do the job. And just for a bit of a pop, I'm going to add some stars to the sky. You know, you could make snowflakes. And there we go. A snowy seascape.